big thing that people have been pushing, the public have been pushing for a long time now, and it's been pushed down the road a lot, is the Occupied Territories Bill. And the one that Micheál Martin and his government are suggesting has been criticised heavily as being a very watered down, because it doesn't include services, which is a huge element of Ireland's trade with Israel and the global trade with Israel. How then, as president, would you feel about signing that bill into, or signing that legislation into law?
Yeah, you see, again, I'm fully aware of the restrictions on a president, and I have very strong opinions on the Occupied Territories Bill, and I'll never shy away from expressing those opinions as a TD. And the Occupied Territories Bill should have been enacted a long time ago, on goods and services. And I mean, Senator Black has done tremendous work from 2017-18 onwards, and here we are. Yeah, it hasn't happened. On top of that, we're trading with Israel through Europe, and that's an obscenity to be trading with a country that's committing genocide. So we'll go back to your question. There are articles in the Constitution that set out the possibilities for a president and also the restrictions. And one of the important roles is to sign legislation into law. Now, legislation is for the government and for the Dáil, and I've participated in many debates and on legislation. My role as president would be to sign it into law or not, and what I'd have to look at, which is quite restricted but very important, whether whatever piece of legislation is before me, whether it's in compliance with the Constitution. If I feel it's not, then there's an article, and I refer it to the Supreme Court under that article, after taking advice from the Council of State. That is the level of the discretion allowed, or the power under the Constitution. So the decision is refer it, and if the Supreme Court find it constitutional, that bill can never be challenged, that act can never be challenged. So obviously I'd have to reflect carefully on sending it to the Supreme Court and taking the chance that they'll find it unconstitutional, or find it constitutional and then it can never be challenged, or pass it into law and let it be challenged in due course. Okay. Leave it open. But that's the restrictive role a president has in relation to legislation. Personally, I feel there should be a referendum on neutrality, and the decision by the government to bring legislation to lose the triple lock. I think there should be a referendum, and I think all opposition and none need to work together to put pressure for a referendum. The people should decide. But the narrative from government is the triple lock, when they're putting through the legislation, has nothing to do with our neutrality. Although the current Taoiseach said it was at the core of our neutrality, the triple lock. And so if I use that as an example, that language and that turning of language creates problems of trust with people of any age, but particularly among young people, that the language means this day, but it doesn't mean it the next day. And I think that's, for me, language has always been very important, that you give meaning to what you say, so that people know where they stand with you. I do want to come back to the issue of neutrality, but just sticking with Palestine for a minute. There was a peace deal struck this week. Look, we'll see what happens with that. There was a peace deal before, and then immediately after that there was a carpet bombing of Gaza from Israel. But you've spoken about the role of the president, and one of those roles is meeting dignitaries, and you were asked about Donald Trump, of course, and would you be comfortable meeting him? A more difficult one would likely be if a peace deal is struck and Benjamin Netanyahu continues to rule over Israel. Would you meet with Benjamin Netanyahu? I worked at Leas Ceann Comhairle for 4.5 years. I met lots of dignitaries, people I didn't agree with at all. I shook their hand. You have a specific role to do that. I went back into the Dáil as an independent TD and made my views known. But I think they're two different roles entirely in relation to it. You would have a specific role as a president, as the leader of the country, in relation to meeting people. That doesn't mean you have to agree with at all. But in his case, I guess, I mean, he's wanted by the ICC for international war crimes. Like, it is probably, I know I'm putting you in a difficult position, because it is
unlikely that if in the future something is to come to a conclusion in a peaceful way, that Netanyahu can possibly stay in charge because he doesn't want to do it in a peaceful way. But there may come the moment where the Irish president does have to. And I'm just wondering, like, would you sit down, or would you meet him in a presidential role if it ever came to it?
It's speculative, isn't it? And I have very strong opinions on Netanyahu. Nobody's any doubt of what I think about Netanyahu. And he is the subject of an arrest warrant, and maybe that might be implemented and put in. But at the moment, we have a powerful man carrying out genocide, and we've powerful America with other countries financing that. And that's the position we find ourselves. At this moment, I hope there's a peace deal.
Okay.
I really, truly, the genocide has to stop, and we have to have a peace deal. As a president, I will do it to the best of my ability, as professionally as I can. That doesn't mean I have to agree with whom I'm meeting.
Yeah. On the subject of neutrality then, why do you think it's critical that Ireland keeps this triple lock, if it's the case of the US and Russia both having a say in what we do?
Well, first of all, America was rarely mentioned as the problem in the Dáil until recently, when the government can't ignore the blatantness of the use of the veto by America. And the most blatant example of that was the UNIFIL forces in the Lebanon, and Irish forces take part in that. And they've 1 year left because America used their veto to say no more peacekeepers in the Lebanon. That was America doing that. And the government have been forced into actually saying that. They don't do it proactively. So for quite some time, a narrative has been building up that Russia and Russia alone was the problem. And obviously Russia have misused the veto as well. But the other countries that used the veto were never highlighted at all, just Russia. So I have a difficulty always with one-sided narrative. So to me, if the government felt there was a problem with the triple lock, then they should have come forward with a detailed position paper to us to say, look, these are the difficulties, this is why we need to change it, and this is what will replace it. Now, they have never done that. They have given a very strong narrative about Russia is the problem. And then there's a huge problem then with me for trust. Where is this coming from? And you look at position papers or whatever title was on what the EU, the Fianna Gael MEPs produced, that we needed to get rid of the triple lock and go more towards to European defence and an army. A position paper of sorts was set out articulating that. Or you look at various comments from various mostly Fianna Gael TDs down through the years who didn't hide that they wanted to move more towards a European defence, European army. And you say, hold on, what's happening here? What are we doing? Where's all the information about this? Which way are we going? What does it mean? But most significantly, they've never told us what will replace the UN mandate. So we'll go back to UNIFIL and we'll take a practical example. And 1 year from now, there'll be no UNIFIL, no UN in the Lebanon. The head of our forces, our defence forces, has said that will be a disaster. He didn't use the word disaster, but he said it will be another Palestine.
Okay.
He has said clearly it will be another Palestine. And so what will replace UNIFIL? What will replace them? What is Ireland saying that will replace the UN mandate? Which England, France, they haven't even discussed it, they haven't set out. And equally importantly, the UN was formed after the Second World War to ensure there would be no more slaughter and no more war, that we would have a body of countries coming together to promote peace. And the infrastructure was set up and the General Assembly. And we should improve on those structures. If you listen to anyone that knows anything about human rights, they'll tell you improve the UN structures, work on them, look at the General Assembly to see what power can be given to the General Assembly, which represents all countries, rather than the 5 powers on the Security Council. The mandate is very important because it's a mandate from the UN given saying these are peacekeepers, as opposed to what? Peace enforcers. Peacekeepers have we have such respect in the world for such a tiny country, and we're sending peacekeepers abroad since 1958 from our defence forces, and then the Gardaí come on board years later. I forget the exact date that the Gardaí, and they also go forward, and they do tremendous work. They're utterly respected. The Lebanese people utterly trust the Irish peacekeepers. Cyprus, the exact same thing. UN peacekeepers from Ireland. And we're going to throw away all that credibility for what? And if you take that credibility based on our history of colonisation for hundreds of years, the famine, the peaceful resolution of the conflict in the north, surely we can use all that experience and our intelligence to use our voice for peace in the world under a UN mandate.